Tommy, thanks for agreeing to spend a few minutes on video and talk about your experience that we've had over the last year or so. Just got a few questions and it might be helpful to others who are thinking about getting services. So
Sure.
if we started and said, if you were to describe how things were going before we started our work together and got you to the point where you said, gee, I need to call Doug.
Well, and this is the euphemism I've used with you before. I was very much engaged in the game of legal whack-a-mole. And at the time, it was just a situation wherein you come over here and a problem would crop up, boom, you stomp it, and then immediately something would turn around either behind you, beside you, expected, unexpected. And that's all I was doing. I was just playing the game of legal whack-a-mole and realized, quite frankly, that's not the best way for my practice to take place. And I had listened to one of your talks through the Bar Association and was thinking one of those instances where I was taking very copious notes and was like engaged. And actually, that's not necessarily always the case in the CLE. And so it was a situation where I was like, hey, this seems to be some folks that have got some plans. They got some experience in helping folks like attorneys such as myself. Hey, why not give them a call and see what we can do?
Terrific. And we've worked together for a little over a year or about a year. So thinking about how it was then and how things are now, how are they different?
You and I have worked together to address the situation. And again, another analogy that I've used is kind of like this concentric circles. And we started off focusing just on some of the time management and best practices on how to get a handle and a hold on the day-to-day fires, the day-to-day operations, and what I do. And then turn around and then take me and not just look at it from a day-to-day, but weekly and then monthly, kind of start thinking in my military background from tactical to a strategic. And then that was the first circle. And then we started looking at how we can have those that work closest with me, my support staff, my paralegals, my associates, and how we can incorporate, again, these best practices and methods and get checklists, get the format, the templates, the constructs that we can all use then to collectively work together on problems on a daily basis, weekly basis, that monthly basis, and kind of think and go through that and then turn around and ultimately not just for myself, but for my firm, and then how to grow that area and grow that practice, not haphazardly.
So the game of whack-a-mole is more under control these days?
It moves slower. It still happens, obviously, and that's to be expected in our profession. But there's even now methods that we put in place to deal with that. A lot of the leadership principles that you and I have discussed come from a military background, and you've got the Eisenhower matrix on how to figure out whether things are urgent and important and where they fall on those axes. And then how we can get that tasking out and it can kind of flow through me and get back out to my support staff and my associates and make sure that the needs of our clients are being met, but it's also being done in a timely fashion, but in a structured way. And we're not missing the forest for the trees and focusing too much time or resources on this issue, but looking at where it falls in the bigger picture and then being able to go from there.
Great, thanks. So one of the questions that I get is the kind of, how can you measure the improvements? Is there a way to measure the improvements that you've experienced in your practice in your life as the result of our time together?
In my practice and a lot of attorneys, you've got to look at the billable hour and it's the classic, you've got to get the work and you've got to do the work, you've got to get paid for it. And so, there has been an uptake, and we've talked about this, and some optimization on ways that I'm able to work just purely from numbers. But then you also have to look at the bigger, I think, issue and picture is there's always work to go around. That's never an issue. All of us could probably work 24 hours a day and never catch up. But that's not the quality of life that I want. I think a lot of folks that you work with, I think they find the same thing. At some point in time, let's manage the hamster wheel. We may not be able to step off of it, but let's slow it down a little bit. And that's one of the ways that I think you can quantify it is by taking everything we've worked on and then have the ability to do some simple things as whether it's scheduled work from home, or, allows for more time off, more time spent with the kids. Something as simple as you've got processes in place. So now I know that, hey, practice, the son's practice is at 6 or the game's at 7 or whatever it is. Previously I might not have made it, but now I've got things in place to allow that issue to be taken care of, the work to be done, that now I can do that. And I can take the long weekend away with the wife or whatever it is. And so clearly there's importance in getting the work done for our clients. We always have to put that up front, but at the same time, we don't want to sacrifice our lives, and whether it's personal, if you've got a family with your family, so on and so forth. And that's how I see bigger, improvements and gains for me has been some of it's I'm less stressed. I'm not quite as on fire, running around like chicken with my head cut off. I can be more intentional when I am at home. I'm not playing with the phone and worried about something, because we've got structures in place that we've worked on that help take care of that.
We started off with some pretty clear agenda of what we wanted to work on. Looking back on it, what was one unexpected bonus that you got that you might not have thought of when we started?
Good question. Again, I think I looked initially at this as more of a workflow optimization. How can I get a better handle on that? And that has translated into for me, a personal calming and an ability to then kind of be able to segregate better that work, work tempo, what's going on with the workflow and operations, and then realize at some point in time, at the end of the day, take that hat off. I'm gonna put the dad hat on. I'm gonna put the husband hat on, and be able to benefit there and see the improvement of the house. And you're not angry at the dog, kicking the dog and stomping through the house and stuff like that. Not saying that took place, but but it does. There has been a noticeable, not a Zen master, I'm not Buddhist and sitting on a rock somewhere and chanting, but there has been some changes that benefited me that I wasn't necessarily expecting, or kind of had that in mind when we started working. I was more focused on let's process and fix it and streamline, and then that kind of bled over into my personal life.
Great. So what would you say to a friend or a colleague who was thinking about getting together and working with me?
A lot of times we think as attorneys, we're paid to fix other people's problems, and that comes natural to us. And while we think, we have the ability to be introspective and perspective as to what's going on around us, that's not always the case. And having somebody come alongside with an outsider's view, but at the same time that has a focus on you. It's like, hey, look, I'm seeing things and I want to bring things to your attention, not in a negative way. While it may be constructive criticism, it's not even coming across as criticism. It's just more along the lines of, somewhat of a Socratic dialogue. Well, I see this. What do you see? And if this is the case, what do you think maybe we can do different? And kind of talking through that has definitely helped. If someone would sit there and say, well, I'm running around proverbial, chicken, on fire, crossing the road, dodging cars, etc. I need some more structure with my practice, and it's a daily process. You've always got to continue to look at it, but the conversations with you will help in that, but also in other areas, and that will then stretch out and make it more valuable across the entirety of the spectrum, as opposed to just a work or an occupational issue.
Yeah, thank you. So you really felt like you got a very positive return on your investment of the time and our time together.
Oh yeah. And I'm not going to be, you've known there's been days where I've had to reschedule. There's days I've come up to you and said, I'm absolutely on fire. Not that I don't want to talk to you, but I don't have the time.
That's right.
And it may mean I'm not putting the processes in place. It may just mean this is the practice on that day. We all know how it's a sine curve. There's days where you're more in control. There's other days where all heck breaks loose, whether it's chambers calling, whether it's a main client that's had a crisis. I personally have had everything from clients having IT data security breaches that shut them down, and it's a governmental entity, and governmental entities can't shut down, but we were. That's a crisis. Sorry, we'll have to.
Yeah, those happen.
Yeah, they happen. And so, but to sit there and say, hey, there is benefit to it, because that process of putting into words on the paper what I'm seeing, you having the ability to go back and listen and say, well, I remember we talked about this with this associate, or I remember we talked about this with this client, and how has that changed? It's just a process. It's definitely helped time.
Thank you. Any other thoughts you'd like to share to wrap up?
I think, without sounding like a sales pitch person, because it's obvious I'm not a salesman, don't have the face for it, but I would definitely say, this is something at a bare minimum folks need to try it and see where they go, and just at least start that conversation. And it may not work for everybody. I get it. What works for me and how we work together, other folks may be different, and they may need a different type of, whether structure or communications, and that's fine. But for folks to sit there and think that they can do it all by themselves, and we've talked about this term that's come up recently, the heroic individual. I've got it all and I'll save myself, and so on and so forth. That's endemic in our profession, and because that's what we get paid to do, but that's not always the case. And there's definitely benefit and value to having someone come alongside, have the ability to have tough conversations, confidential conversations, mention things that you can't take out into the public eye. You can't sit there and tell your buddy over 2 beers at the football game some of these things, some of these issues. That there's definitely value to that.
Great. Well, thanks again for taking the time to share your thoughts, and
Sure.
I'm looking forward to seeing what the next year brings for you.
Let's hope it's good.
It will be. Thank you.
I think, sir.